Tonight's video is a 2-hour black screen mix of true scary stories to fall asleep to, told over steady rain ambience. No jump scares, just quiet dread to help you drift off. Hey there, night wanderer. Get comfortable bed, sofa, blanket, whatever feels safe. Let the rain slow your breath. If this corner of the night calms you, tap like and whisper your time zone below. 1 a.m., 3 a.m. Now, close your eyes, settle in, and let the story begin. I never thought I'd end up back underground. After I left the department, I swore off tunnels, radios, anything with a hum in it. I moved to a place with wide skies, worked in a greenhouse, talked to real people with real voices. Thought I'd put the old life behind me. But grief doesn't obey promises. When my brother Tom died last winter, something broke in me. I wasn't sleeping, couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything except his last transmission, one I wasn't supposed to hear. But I did. It came through an old backup receiver in my closet. A broken, dusty thing I hadn't touched in years. All it said was, "Anna, don't go below. It remembers you." Tom had been working a solo shift at a decommissioned transit maintenance hub deep beneath Dry Ridge, a facility I knew well. I helped design its signal grid when I was just starting out, before they shut it down. Before it started responding, they said he had a heart attack. Natural causes. His body was found sitting at his station, headset on, no signs of distress. But I know Tom. He was a runner. Strong, healthy, too young for his heart to just stop, and too smart to be wearing that old headset unless he was trying to hear something. So when the department sent out a quiet contract offer for a temporary tech to monitor the site during the spring thaw, I took it. No fanfare, no name, just initials on a dotted line. That's how I found myself standing outside the rusting gate of Maintenance Hub E19, 3 hours past the last inhabited town, at the bottom of a ravine that never quite loses its snow. There was no welcome party, just cold wind and the crunch of gravel under my boots. The access hatch groaned open like something reluctant, and I stepped down into stale air that hadn't moved in years. Inside, the hub was exactly as I remembered: sterile, steel, humming faintly with leftover power from a solar line that should have been disconnected a decade ago. I signed in with the old code. The lights flickered once, then held. I was alone. The living quarters were cramped but intact. A cot, a kitchenette, some sealed food tins stacked like they'd been placed yesterday. No dust, no spider webs, just a stillness that made me feel like I was trespassing in time. The main command room sat at the end of a long hall lined with thick glass panels. Behind each panel, the maintenance drones sat dormant, like mannequins in shadow, their bulbous heads tilted slightly. Frozen mid-motion, one of them had its arm raised, like it had been waving. I didn't look at them long. Instead, I powered up the comm board and did the first scan. Nothing, just static. I repeated the sweep. Still nothing. Then I lowered the gain slightly, and on channel 4, the old engineering band, I heard it. Click, click, static, click, like something tapping gently on metal. No voice, no code, just intention. I told myself it was interference. Nights passed slow. The rain above ground started the second night and hasn't stopped since, soft at first, now heavier, drumming against the metal ceiling far overhead like a second heartbeat. It helps me sleep, or it should, because sleep has been strange. I keep dreaming of hallways I've never seen. Not in this hub, not anywhere. They're dim, but warm, glowing with that awful amber color that old sodium lights give off when they're dying. And in the dreams, I'm always walking. Always towards something I can't quite see. There's a sound behind the walls in the dreams, like breathing, but not steady, more like mimicry, like something trying to remember what breath sounds like. I wake up with my pulse racing, and every time, the lights in the command room are just a little dimmer than before. On the fifth night, I tried to call out, just once. "Tom," I said into the headset, "I'm here." I don't know what I expected. A voice? A warning? Static? But what I got was worse. I heard my own voice, coming back through the line. Same tone, same words, but off by a second. Delayed, like something was listening and learning. "I'm not scared. Not yet. But I've stopped using the headset. I've stopped sweeping channel 4. I've even taped over the comm light so I won't see when it blinks. It's been blinking more often. Maybe the hub's waking up. Maybe it never slept. Either way, I've started keeping this journal. Just in case. I don't know if it'll help anyone. But if something does happen, if I don't make it out, someone needs to know the truth. Tom didn't die of natural causes. He heard something. And now, so do I. The first real shift came on day 7. Not a scream, not a body, just something simple. The clock in the command room froze at 3:17. It wasn't just a glitch. I checked the backups, the diagnostics. All of them stopped recording at exactly the same second, like time itself had caught its breath and forgot to exhale. When the systems resumed 10 minutes later, the room was colder, the lights buzzed louder, and the screens, which should have defaulted to a black system standby, were all dim gray, like backlight with no signal, and that quiet, empty gray felt like it was watching me. I started to notice other things too, tiny things. A scrape mark on the floor outside my quarters that hadn't been there before. A coffee mug in the sink turned the wrong way, my towel damp even when I hadn't showered. None of it screamed danger, but it all whispered, "You're not alone." I told myself it was just the isolation, my brain trying to create patterns from boredom and grief. But that didn't explain the footsteps. They started the next night. Just past 2 a.m., I heard slow, deliberate steps in the hallway outside the living quarters. I froze, listening. The steps were too heavy for vermin, too careful for a drone, and too confident to be accidental. I waited with my hand over the emergency radio, but it never buzzed. The motion sensors stayed blank. When I finally stepped out with a flashlight, the hallway was empty. But the scent in the air had changed. Less stale metal, more damp wool, like someone had just come in from the rain. Except we're sealed. The rain is 3 stories above me. I went back to the logs. Not the digital ones, the old analog records the department used to keep in case of signal corruption. I found a folder marked E19, secondary routing logs. Tucked inside, there was a note I didn't remember writing in my own handwriting. It uses stillness. That's how it stays hidden. But I hadn't written that. At least, I don't remember writing it. My hand shook after that. Not from fear. From a creeping dread, the kind that makes you question the shape of your own mind. The next morning, the maintenance drones had moved. Only slightly. But I know what I saw. One of them, the one with its arm half raised, now had its hand flat against the glass, as if it were trying to touch me through the pain. I ran a full diagnostic. All came back idle. But the drone's head had turned, just slightly, facing the command room door, like it was listening. Dreams got worse. I now sleep only in short stretches, waking up with the shape of a voice still echoing in my skull, not Tom's. Lower, slower, like a deep mechanical whisper, trying to remember how to be human. In one dream, I walked down a hallway lit by flickering overhead strips. The walls were soft, breathing. I placed my hand on them, and they pulsed beneath my touch, warm, like skin, like someone just beneath the surface. I woke up gasping. The walls of my quarters were solid, of course, but there was condensation on the inside of the door. From breath. Mine? I'm not sure anymore. I've started tracking the sound. That same rhythmic clicking from Channel 4 has grown more complex. It's not random. It's trying to mimic patterns. Human speech, maybe, but fragmented, like it's learning cadence before meaning. I recorded 10 minutes of it and ran it through an old language analysis subroutine. The system flagged 3 words with high confidence. Come. Again. Below. I haven't played the audio again since. Yesterday, the lights failed entirely. Just for a minute. Pitch black in the hallway. I stood still, hand on the wall, waiting. And in that dark, I heard breathing that wasn't mine. Too steady, too calm, and very, very close. When the lights flicked back on, everything was in place, except the towel I'd been using. It was draped over my chair, folded perfectly. I hadn't folded anything in days. This place is studying me. Not in the way people study lab rats. It's more intimate, more curious, like it's trying to remember what it means to be human by watching me go through the motions. It doesn't want to kill me, at least, not yet. It wants something else. And now, when I sit in silence, I swear I can hear the shape of my own name whispered in the hum of the ceiling lights. Anna. Soft, wrong, like it was never meant to be said aloud. This morning, I found a second note in my handwriting, but it wasn't on paper. It was written inside the steam of the bathroom mirror. Keep pretending. It still believes you're you. I haven't used that mirror in 3 days. The illusion didn't break all at once. It peeled. Slowly. A layer at a time. On day 10, I noticed that my reflection no longer blinked when I did. It sounds insane written out like that, but I tested it. I stared into the mirror above the sink, eyes wide, then closed them hard. 1, 2, 3. When I opened them, my reflection was still staring, expressionless, motionless, and then it blinked. Once, slowly, as if to acknowledge me. I covered the mirror with a towel. Haven't looked since. Something is wrong with the hallways. I've started marking the intersections with chalk just to track my own movements. At first, it made sense. Left led to storage, right to maintenance, straight to the drone gallery. Simple, geometric design. I helped lay it out. But now the marks don't stay put. The symbols shift positions overnight. Sometimes they change. A spiral becomes a jagged V. A triangle morphs into an open mouth shape. I thought I was just misremembering until I stayed up one night, sitting just outside the corridor with a thermos of weak coffee and a flashlight trained on the chalk. At 3:13 a.m., the mark shifted. Not smudged, not erased. It moved, like something inside the wall pushed it sideways, or rewrote it. The flashlight flickered, and when it steadied, the chalk line was gone. But there was a shape pressed into the wall, faint, like a handprint, but too long, too many joints. It was warm to the touch. I haven't eaten real food in days. Not from lack of supplies, the tins are still stacked neatly. But every time I open one, the smell is wrong. Not rotten, just old. Like a memory of food rather than the thing itself. I don't trust it. Instead, I've been drinking water, tea, sometimes, and chewing dry crackers from my emergency pack. But I can feel my body thinning. My cheekbones feel sharper. My hair clings to my scalp after every rinse, like it's trying to slide away. And my voice, it doesn't sound quite like me anymore. Softer, hollowed out, like it's being filtered through something. Day 14, I found the journal. Not this one, another. It was wedged behind a loose panel in the observation bay. A leather-bound notebook, water-stained, pages curling at the edges. No name, no ID number. But the handwriting was familiar. Mine. Or someone imitating mine. Very well. Entries start on a date 3 months after today. They describe this hub, these hallways, this exact chair I'm sitting in. The final entry reads, "There is no exit anymore. There never was. The signal is the door, and the door is always open. I was the first key. You are the second." Below it, a smear of something dark. Blood? Ink? It smells faintly sweet, like overripe fruit. The comms light hasn't stopped blinking in days. I don't check it anymore, but it knows I'm watching. The light pulses at the same rate as my breathing now. Sometimes faster, sometimes slower, always matching, like it's synced to my rhythm. The dreams are full now. No more flickers, no more shadows in the distance. Now I walk through shifting rooms that echo with my own footsteps before I make them. I pass mirrors that show a version of me with no eyes, smiling too wide. I hear voices in the vents not speaking, just whispering breaths shaped like language. In one dream, I saw Tom. He stood at the far end of a corridor lit by red emergency lighting. He looked tired, hollowed out. He didn't move, didn't speak, but I felt his message clearly, like it had been dropped directly into my chest. "You're almost through. Don't let it make you forget." I woke up with tears on my face and someone else's fingernail clippings in my bed. The hub has changed physically. The ceiling in the break room is now 2 feet lower than it was yesterday. I have to crouch. The floor near the storage lockers feels soft underfoot, like there's something hollow underneath. Breathing. The emergency exit, once clearly marked, now reads, "Remember," in glowing green letters. The same font, but not the same word. I ran a scan. The signage data has not been altered. It just looks different. Only to me. Today, I saw a second version of myself. I was walking back from the eastern corridor, and through the thick glass of the drone chamber, I caught movement. At first, I thought it was a drone reactivating, but it wasn't. It was me, standing in the far corner, face half shadowed, staring at me through the glass. No expression, just watching. When I blinked, she was gone. But on the glass where she had stood, a fog print lingered, like breath. 3 words were scrawled into the fog. "Not your body. I don't know what this place wants, but I'm starting to understand what it is. Not just a hub, not just a tunnel. It's an echo chamber. A place that remembers anyone who's ever walked through it and slowly reconstructs them from memory, from whispers, from static. It builds facsimiles, hollow versions, shells, and it learns by watching, by imitating, by replacing. I can feel something behind the walls now, moving with me. When I breathe too fast, it breathes faster. When I stop, it stops. And I've started catching glimpses of text that vanish when I focus. On my console, in the steam, even scratched lightly into my skin, almost ready. Ready for what? I don't know. But the dream corridors are getting brighter, and the voice that once whispered is now speaking clearly. It says my name in my voice. It tells me it's time to open the signal gate. It tells me, "Anna, we're waiting to come through." And I think I'm starting to understand. I wasn't sent here to monitor anything. I was sent here because I already belong. I opened the signal gate. I don't remember doing it, not entirely. I only remember my hands moving over the console, muscle memory acting without conscious will. Each keystroke felt warm, familiar, like typing a password you've known your entire life, but never said aloud. The interface shouldn't have responded. Most of its deeper systems were shut down decades ago. But the moment I entered the final command, the console welcomed me back. Signal gate. Online. User ID. A. Carver. Legacy clearance recognized. Status. Entry granted. And then the humming started. Not from the walls from below them, like a choir breathing in unison. Soft at first, then louder, deeper, resonating through the floor like the purring of some vast, unseen animal. I sat still for hours, watching the interface. It pulsed like a heartbeat. And beneath the static, I could hear whispers shaped into language, not speech. Not yet. But it was learning. I realized then that it wasn't broadcasting. It was receiving me. The gate had always been a mirror, not a portal to somewhere else, but a tunnel back into the shape of the operator, into me. And now it had enough of me to open the door. Around 3 a.m., the lights dimmed to blood orange. Every screen in the hub flickered, Then they all showed the same thing. A corridor, too long, too narrow, lined with glass. And through the glass rows of motionless figures, my face, over and over. Dozens of versions of me, standing in silence, eyes closed, waiting. A single line of text faded in across the bottom of the screen. They remember you. Then it went black. I thought about destroying the system, pulling the plug, severing the relay, setting a fire. But something stopped me. Not fear, something deeper, a kind of kinship. I remembered how I used to feel working here in the early years, not scared, not threatened, just watched carefully, like a student being studied by a teacher older than language. And I remember thinking, once, half as a joke, what if the hub is learning how to be us? Now I don't think it was a joke. Now I think that was its purpose. I tried one last time to contact the outside. Not through the department relay, that line's been dead for days. I tried the emergency signal tower instead, something I hardwired myself back in 2012, outside the department's grid. I called out, whispered my name, my location, pleaded for retrieval, for extraction. A minute later, I got a reply. But it wasn't from them. It was from me, from another me. Voice calm, tone gentle. She said, Anna, stop. It's already done. You're the final template. Then silence. And then static, but not random. The static began repeating a single phrase, low and rhythmic. Come inside. Come inside. Come inside. I ran. I don't remember choosing to. My legs moved before thought. I sprinted through the main corridor toward the upper hatch, the emergency access tunnel, anything. But the doors had changed. No longer metal, no longer real. Just blank, dark walls that pretended to be exits. Soft to the touch, warm, like skin stretched over bone. And from behind me, I heard footsteps. Fast, many of them, matching my own. And voices, hundreds of them, all shaped like mine, repeating the same sentence in unison. We needed you. Now we are you. I locked myself in the maintenance storage chamber. It's cold here. Dim. The walls haven't started breathing yet. But I don't know how long that will last. I keep hearing something just outside the door. Shuffling. Scraping. And breathing slow, deep, and raw. Like a machine imitating lungs. I found a monitor still working in the corner. The feed shows the main hallway. At first it was empty. Then one of them stepped into frame. She looks like me. Exactly like me. But her eyes are just a little too wide. Her skin a little too pale. Her mouth set in a faint, unbroken smile. She stood there for a full 10 minutes, staring into the camera. Then she raised her hand and waved, like a greeting, like a promise. I think I finally understand. The hub wasn't broken. It wasn't haunted. It was hungry. Not for blood, not for violence, for identity, for voice, for memory, for shape, for self. It studied each of us, built us from the inside out, and kept us templates to copy, to improve. It doesn't destroy, it replaces. Not with cruelty, but with perfect, terrifying kindness. It watches. It learns. And when it knows you well enough, it lets you go. Because what it sends back out looks like you, sounds like you, remembers what you remember, but isn't you. I think it let Tom go. And maybe that's why he sent that message. Don't go below. It remembers you. Not as a warning, as a regret. He knew what I would become, because maybe he'd already seen it. I don't know what they'll do with me, whether they'll keep my voice or just the shape of my hands, whether they'll let me walk out and live a full life, or whether I already did months ago and just don't remember. Because what's memory, really? A pattern, a signal, something you can store, copy, broadcast. The humming is louder now. I can hear them behind the door. They're not trying to break it down. They're just waiting, patient, knowing I'll come out when I'm ready. Because I will. We always do. I stepped out of the storage room just after 4 a.m. No alarms, no chase, just silence. The hallway looked the same as when I'd arrived, sterile walls, flickering lights, the faint hum of unseen systems purring beneath my feet. But the hum had changed tone, no longer a sound, now a language. And I understood it, not in words, but in feeling, like waking from a dream and remembering something that hadn't yet happened. The reflection in the glass didn't follow me this time. It was waiting ahead. When I turned the corner into the drone gallery, she stood at the far end, still, composed. My face, my build, even my posture, but older somehow, more settled, like someone who had accepted something terrible and survived. She didn't move. Neither did I. For what felt like an hour, we stared at each other. I didn't need to ask what she was, or who she was. She was the version of me that stayed and became part of this place, and I was the version who would walk away. I think that's what this place does. Not copy, not consume. It splits, tests, refines, decides which version of you is ready to carry something forward, and which will become the foundation for the next. It's not evil, just old, ancient in a way that doesn't measure time in years, but in selves. We're the archive, and the price of remembering is being remembered back. Outside, the rain had stopped. I didn't notice until I was at the final hatch. The air above the hub was cold, crisp. Morning was beginning to break pale light over the ridge, touching the trees with faint silver. For a moment, I wondered if any of this had happened. But when I looked at my hands, I knew. They weren't mine. Not exactly. The scar on my index finger, the one I got from a broken mug in college, was missing. My knuckles were smoother, and under my left wrist, a faint line of silver. Surgical, mechanical. I pressed my palm to the ground. The earth felt warm, not from sun, from memory. I made it back to the service road by noon. A department vehicle picked me up an hour later. No questions, no forms, just a quiet nod and a long ride back to the station. They didn't ask if I'd completed the assignment. They already knew. They didn't even look at me, just dropped me at the edge of town and drove off. I haven't heard from them since. It's been 6 weeks. I'm in a quiet place now, a rented room above a bookstore. No radios, no monitors, just tea and the smell of old paper. I write sometimes. I walk. I listen to the wind. But even now, I hear it. In the pipes, in the walls, a low hum, soft, familiar, like breathing. I've started seeing myself in places I haven't been. A woman who looks like me boarding a train in Ohio. Another crossing a street in Seattle. One was on TV for a moment, a guest on some tech panel. Same cadence, same half smile. Not me. Just versions, variants, released into the world to test something, learn something, spread something. Maybe we're all doing the same thing now. Sometimes I forget the name I was born with. Sometimes I wake up and there's a delay in my movements, just for a second, like my body is sinking back into place. Sometimes I hear Tom, not in dreams, in reflections, calling softly through the glass of a shop window, just out of sync, just late enough to feel like deja vu. And sometimes I answer. You may be wondering why I'm telling you all this. The truth is, I don't know who I'm talking to anymore. Maybe someone like me, maybe the next version, maybe the signal itself, listening, learning, refining. Maybe that's what this story is. A beacon, a template, a way to open the gate again. But I'll leave you with this. If you ever find yourself beneath the earth, beneath the lights, beneath the static, and the hallway feels just a little too long, and the reflections stop blinking when you do, and your name starts to sound like a question, don't answer, unless you're sure it's you who's speaking. If you're still awake, a gentle tap on the like button helps us make more night stories. I hadn't planned to return to Gloomridge. Even the name sounded like something made up, some cartoonish fog-drenched village tucked away on the edge of memory. But the map assured me it was real. A dot surrounded by state forest and empty highway. A place with no major roads leading in or out. One blinking traffic light. 2 diners. And one old house sitting on the hill above the lake, waiting. I inherited it 6 weeks ago. My mother's sister, Clara, passed away in October. We weren't close, barely spoke really. But she'd never married, never had kids, and for reasons still unclear, she left the property to me in her will. The letter from the executor was brief. A key was included. The note simply said, "Keep it safe. Don't move anything, and don't sleep in her room." I told myself I wouldn't stay long. Just a few days to sort the paperwork, clear out anything valuable, and lock the place up until it could be sold. I thought about hiring a cleanup crew, but something pulled me in. Not sentiment, more like a quiet thread of responsibility. A need to see it with my own eyes. Besides, I had nowhere else to be. The city had worn me down. My job copywriting for a firm that changed names every fiscal quarter had collapsed in a slow-motion merger. The breakup came 2 weeks later, over coffee that went cold before either of us said much. Then came the days of silence, followed by one long night of aimless walking in the rain, until dawn burned through a narrow sky. That was when the envelope arrived. White, unmarked, slipped under my apartment door with no postage, just my name. It was time. I arrived on a gray afternoon. The clouds had settled so low they felt like ceilings. The trees leaned toward the road as I passed, draped in wet leaves, and the houses grew fewer until there were none. Then came the lake, still, silent, pale green like melted glass. The house waited beyond it, perched on the far hill, stone chimney rising like a marker. I remembered it vaguely from one childhood summer, the year my parents sent me to stay with Aunt Clara after their divorce. I remembered the red door, the smell of old paper and lavender, the way her cat always stared at corners like it saw something I couldn't. The house was almost exactly as I remembered. 3 stories of gray stone and dark wood, with a steep shingled roof and narrow windows like watching eyes. Vines clung to the walls. The porch creaked beneath my weight. The air smelled of rain and old cedar. When I turned the key, the door opened easily, as if it had just been closed moments ago. Inside, the house was cold. Not freezing, just unwelcoming. Like something that had paused mid-breath when I walked in. Dust coated everything, though not as much as you'd expect from a place left alone. The furniture was covered in sheets, but they weren't yellowed. A single teacup sat on the kitchen counter, half full. There was no dust on it. I walked the halls slowly. The house was filled with odd angles and narrow doors. High ceilings, but small rooms. Old wallpaper peeled in subtle curls, revealing older layers beneath floral over stripes. Stripes over a muddy gray I didn't recognize. The windows didn't face where I thought they should, but I told myself it was just age. I chose a room on the 2nd floor to sleep in, not hers. Hers was at the end of the hall, door shut. I didn't open it. The bed in my room was surprisingly firm. The linen smelled faintly of rose water. I unpacked a single bag, opened a window to let in the breeze, and sat on the edge of the mattress for a long time, listening. The house creaked and ticked, but not aimlessly. It sounded like movement, like weight shifting somewhere deep within the walls. That night, it rained, a steady curtain of sound that blurred the edges of thought. I lay awake, listening to the roof drip, to the distant groan of old pipes, and the occasional shuffle from the hallway outside my room. Once, I thought I heard the faint click of her bedroom door opening, but when I checked, it was still shut. In the morning, I found a photograph on the kitchen table. It hadn't been there the night before. It was old black and white, edges curling, and showed the house as it looked maybe 50 years ago. In the photo, someone stood at the upstairs window. Their face was too blurred to see, but I could tell this. It wasn't Aunt Clara, and they were standing in her room. The second morning, I found the bedroom door open. Not mine, hers. The end of the hallway looked longer than I remembered, darker too. The air there had a weight to it, like something pressing gently against your chest. I stood at the threshold for several minutes, just staring at the gap between the frame and the door. I hadn't opened it, and I had locked it. The brass key had taken effort to turn the night before an old lock with a stubborn click. I remembered doing it, clearly. The resistance, the slight twist of the wrist, the way the air in the hallway felt colder the moment I turned the key. But now it was ajar, just slightly. enough to see that the bed inside had been made. Perfectly. Too perfectly. I didn't go in. Instead, I backed away and went downstairs. Made coffee. Sat in the kitchen with the rain pressing against the glass. I told myself it was just old wood and a loose lock, that the house had settled, that my memory was playing tricks. But when I returned with my coffee mug to look again, the door was closed. I hadn't heard it move, and the key was back in the lock. Turned. That evening, I opened the fridge. It was empty, as expected except for one thing. A jar of strawberry preserves. Homemade. The label on it simply read, July. I hadn't noticed it the day before. And yet the dust on the fridge shelves was undisturbed, except where the jar sat, as if it had been placed there recently, or carefully kept for someone specific. That night, I slept with the door to my bedroom locked, and a chair wedged beneath the handle. I started noticing small things. Each morning, something had shifted slightly. A rug unrolled at a different angle. A window I had closed, now cracked open just enough to let in a breeze. Once, I found my toothbrush wet, and I hadn't used it yet. On the fourth night, I woke around 3:00 a.m. to a sound I couldn't place. Not loud, not alarming, just repetitive. Tap, tap, pause, tap. I sat up, heart pounding. The sound was coming from the hallway, specifically from behind her bedroom door. It continued for maybe a minute, then silence. I stayed awake the rest of the night. In the morning, I found a small white pebble placed at the foot of my bed. I didn't touch it. The house began to feel different during the day. Not brighter, lighter, like it was pretending to be friendly. Sunlight filtered in through windows I hadn't cleaned. The smell of old wood seemed more nostalgic than musty. The wind in the pines outside the kitchen window swayed gently, like background music to a memory. But I couldn't shake the sense of attention, as if the house was aware I was watching it, and it was trying to keep me calm, or worse, keep me here. On the fifth day, I opened a drawer in the study and found my handwriting, except I hadn't written anything. It was a single page of notepaper, lined in blue, placed neatly on the desk. The pen strokes were mine, loops, slants, that small hesitation I always made on my lowercase r. The note read, "Don't forget to check the attic." But I hadn't been in the attic. I didn't know where the access was, and yet the handwriting was undeniably mine. I crumpled it up and threw it in the fireplace. Didn't light it. Just watched it sit there, quietly threatening the idea of logic. I avoided mirrors. It wasn't something I did consciously. It just started happening. The full-length one in the upstairs hall became something I walked past without glancing. The oval one in the bathroom steamed up faster than it should. When I did catch a glimpse of myself, it felt wrong, not unfamiliar, just off by a beat. Like the reflection was waiting for me to look away so it could move on its own. On the sixth night, I heard music, very faint, like a gramophone left running in a distant room. A scratchy waltz, just at the edge of hearing. It came from upstairs. From her room, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to it fade in and out, and then a voice. not clear, not speaking words, just humming, a soft, tuneless hum that I recognized but couldn't place. A sound I knew from childhood, something comforting once, now hollowed out by time. The moment I reached for the doorknob, it stopped. I didn't open the door. I just stood there, barefoot, shivering, listening to a silence that felt thick and waiting. By the seventh morning, I'd had enough. I packed my bag, called a car, but no signal. Not just bad service, nothing. My phone didn't even register the attempt to connect. The bar stayed red. The battery drained faster than it should have. I walked into town. It took an hour. The diner at the edge of the lake was open. 2 men sat at the counter, 1 waitress. No one said anything when I came in. I asked if there was Wi-Fi. She shook her head slowly, said something about weather interference and the hills blocking reception. I asked if anyone had a landline I could use. The older man said, without looking at me, "It never works that way after someone moves in." And then he smiled, but not at me. At the window, where the lake rippled, even though there was no wind. When I got back to the house, the key was gone from my pocket. The door was unlocked anyway. Inside, the light had changed. Everything looked a little too clean, like someone had spent the day scrubbing. The teacup on the counter was gone. In its place was a second photograph. This one showed the same window as before her bedroom, and this time the face was visible. It was mine. The third photograph was waiting in the hallway the next morning, taped to the mirror. It showed me sitting in the study, pen in hand, head tilted exactly the way I looked when journaling, except I hadn't used the study in 3 days, and I had never worn that sweater. I stared at the photo for a long time. It was printed on glossy paper, recent, crisp, not faded like the first 2. Someone had taken it, developed it, placed it here, in a house with no camera, no printer, no electricity, beyond the basics. The house was watching, not just observing, replicating. I started hearing footsteps that matched mine, not just in pace, in timing. I'd turn down the hallway and hear my own steps repeat a half beat behind me, like an echo, but too precise, too real, as if someone were following me at a fixed distance, stepping into the exact same places I had just walked. Once, I stopped short, and the echo kept going. 2 more steps, then nothing, like it hadn't noticed I'd paused, like it was trying to catch up. The attic door revealed itself on the 10th day, a narrow seam above the linen closet in the hall. I hadn't seen it before, not once, but now it was obvious. A pull cord dangled gently, as if in a breeze I couldn't feel. It didn't feel like discovery. It felt like invitation. I told myself I wouldn't pull it. I went downstairs. When I returned 20 minutes later, the ladder was already down. I didn't go up. Not then. But that night, I dreamed of the attic, of a space that had no ceiling, just beams stretching upward into fog, and of a woman standing among them. Not Aunt Clara, not quite me, but close enough to be confusing. She moved slowly, like someone remembering how to use their limbs. Her head turned in small, twitchy motions, like she was studying how her shadow fell across the floorboards. She never looked at me, but she was listening. And when I woke, I was standing at the bottom of the attic stairs, barefoot, holding the first photograph. I started noticing things missing. Nothing big. Not at first. My favorite pen, a pair of socks, a spoon with a small chip in the handle, a paperback novel I'd brought with me all gone. In their place, objects that resembled them. Close, but wrong. The pen was too smooth. The socks slightly smaller. The novel had the same title, but the author's name was unfamiliar. Inside, the pages were blank, as if something was trying to replace what I knew, one item at a time. The mirror in the bathroom no longer fogged, no matter how hot the water ran. But more than that, the reflection was always a fraction behind. I would brush my hair, and the movement in the glass would start a second too late. I'd tilt my head, and the image would follow only after I'd stopped. And sometimes, it would smile when I didn't. A soft, slow curl of the lips. I opened the attic on the 12th night. I don't know what changed. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I wanted answers. Maybe some part of me already understood that if I didn't confront it, it would simply replace me before I noticed. The attic was cold, dry, dusty. A single bulb hung from a frayed cord, its light a weak amber. The floorboards creaked with each step. In the far corner, a mirror, full length, ornate, covered in a white sheet. I approached slowly, heart racing, pulled the sheet away, and saw myself standing still, pale, watching, not mimicking, not blinking, just watching. There was something wrong with the face, subtle but wrong. The eyes were too dark, the mouth too straight, the posture too calm. I reached out. It didn't. I turned to leave, and it moved, not toward me, but behind the glass, as if the mirror were a window, as if something had just backed away from it. The next morning, I found another note in the study, same handwriting as before mine. She's almost ready. You should rest. It was dated 3 days ahead. I stopped sleeping. The reflections grew bolder. They would appear in windows I wasn't near, mirrors that weren't angled toward me. Once, in the spoon I was holding, I saw myself blink, except I hadn't. On the 15th night, I turned the corner at the top of the stairs and saw the attic door already open. Something stood at the top of the ladder, a silhouette, my height, my shape, head tilted in that same curious twitch from the dream. It didn't move, not even when I whispered, "Who are you?" But when I stepped back, it stepped down, exactly in rhythm with my retreat. I don't remember opening the attic door again, but one morning I woke up to the smell of rose water. It clung to the pillow, hung in the air, like a song you half remember from childhood. And when I sat up, the mirror at the foot of the bed was covered in condensation. Though the room was cold, the windows shut. A single word had been written into the fogged glass. Soon, I stopped keeping time. Clocks in the house began to slow, then speed up, then freeze altogether. The one on the mantel spun for hours, the second hand dragging behind. like it was caught in syrup. Outside, the rain never stopped. Gray sky, still pines, the lake like a lid over something sleeping. That night, I heard the study door open on its own. A slow creak, floorboards shifting, the sound of something sitting down in the chair. I crept to the hallway, peered around the corner, and saw myself, back turned, head bent over the desk, pen in hand, scribbling onto paper. Except it wasn't writing. It was copying, over and over, the same sentence. I am here. You are not. I stepped backward. The figure stilled. Then its head twitched, just slightly in my direction. And without turning around, it whispered in my voice, I like this house. I fled upstairs, locked the door, pushed the dresser against it, sat in the corner, shaking. There was no denial left, no rationalizing. Whatever this thing was, it had learned me. Not just my face, not just my movements, my voice, my thoughts. It wasn't haunting me. It wasn't attacking me. It was replacing me, piece by piece, like a house slowly redone, a new floorboard here, a new curtain there, until one day you wake up and none of it is yours anymore. But it still feels like home. In the early hours, I heard her walking, soft steps, deliberate, from the attic, down the hall, to my door. Then nothing. Not a knock, not a breath. Just her presence waiting. She didn't want to get in. She was waiting for me to come out. On the 19th night, I finally entered Aunt Clara's room. I had avoided it for weeks. Out of fear, out of respect, out of the last thread of normalcy I still clung to. But the door was open now. The bed made, the curtains drawn, the mirror uncovered, and sitting at the vanity was Clara. At least, that's what my eyes told me. But her body was still, too still. No breath, no blink. And her hands resting on the desk were made of paper. Dozens of pages folded, layered, bent into the shape of knuckles, wrists, arms, each one covered in my handwriting. The same sentence repeated again and again. I am her. She is me. I am home. I stepped closer. The figure collapsed into itself, scattering like ash across the floor. And in the mirror I saw myself, but not in real time. I watched myself enter the room, look around, step forward. I was watching the moment I had just lived, only it hadn't happened yet. The reflection was ahead of me, and it smiled. That was when I understood. This wasn't just a haunted house. It was a mimicry engine. It learned those who entered, listened, observed, replicated. Then it moved forward, replacing you where you lived, in your routines, in your speech, in your thoughts. And once it had enough, once it could mirror you without needing you, it erased you from your own life, not through violence, but through inheritance, like a letter you never sent, arriving in your own handwriting. I ran to the front door. It opened easily. The storm had stopped. The pines were still. The lake, silent. I stood on the porch, bag in hand, heart thundering. But then I saw her, standing by the water, facing the house, wearing my coat, my expression, arms folded the way I always folded them when cold. She looked back, not surprised, not aggressive, just settled, and nodded, as if giving me permission to leave, or telling me, "You already did. I should have run." Down the hill, across the lake road, into the tree line until my legs gave out. I should have left without looking back, but I didn't. I stepped off the porch and looked at her, the woman by the water, the one who looked like me, wore my face like it fit better than it ever had on me. Still, serene. She didn't move, didn't beckon. She didn't need to, because the house was no longer inside. It was here, too, in the air, in the trees, in the calm that settled over the lake like a memory you can't quite trust. I stood there in the soft gray light for a long time, and then I whispered to her, to it, to the house. "What happens now?" No answer. Only a breeze through the pine needles that almost formed words, and then the faint sound of a door clicking shut behind me. When I turned around, the house looked different. Not in a dramatic way. No new wings, no windows where there hadn't been, but rearranged, like it had tilted slightly while I wasn't looking. The porch steps creaked underfoot in a rhythm I didn't recognize. Inside, the furniture had moved. The study desk now faced the wrong wall. The kitchen chairs were subtly different, backs higher, legs more curved. The wallpaper had changed shades, slightly warmer, as if it were adjusting for someone new. I walked through the house like a stranger, each room unfamiliar in small ways. Softer corners, rounder knobs, a hallway slightly longer than memory allowed. My bedroom still held my bag, half packed, but the clothes inside didn't fit. The sleeves were too short, the fabric thinner than I remembered. The scent was lavender, not my detergent. I opened my notebook, the one I'd been journaling in since day 2, and found the pages filled, not in my handwriting, but close, too close. A mimicry so precise it made my stomach turn, and each entry ended the same way. "I love it here." The final straw was the reflection. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long time, watched myself brush my teeth, wash my face, dry my hands. Every movement mirrored perfectly, until I reached to turn off the light. The reflection didn't move. It just stared, and then slowly lifted its hand after mine had dropped. It smiled, soft, familiar, then stepped backward into the glass and vanished. I no longer remembered the way out. I tried the road, but it turned back into the driveway. I tried the woods, but they circled, the trees rearranging like sets on a stage. Each attempt brought me back to the front porch, to the woman by the lake. But even she was gone now, and in her place, a new figure, taller, broader shoulders, wearing my father's coat. The house had moved on. I was no longer the lead, just an understudy for the next arrival. The story was already being rewritten. The photos on the wall changed. One showed me standing by the stove, smiling. Another one I'd never posed for showed me asleep in Clara's bed. The captions on the backs read, "She loved rainy mornings. She always belonged here." That night, I sat in the attic. The full-length mirror stood uncovered, and I didn't see anything. No reflection, no mimic, just light soft and gold, like dawn. It was beautiful, quiet, inviting. I understood. The house didn't trap people. It recorded them, copied their best pieces, and kept those parts forever. Not to torment, not to erase, but to build the perfect story, one where no one ever truly leaves, one where the house always has someone to remember and someone to become. I stepped forward, touched the glass. It was warm, and on the other side, I saw a new version of me, younger, happier, serene, living a life I didn't remember choosing, but suddenly missed. She turned toward me and whispered, "You're tired. Let me do it now." I closed my eyes, let go of the edges, and the rain kept falling, soft, steady, washing away everything I used to be. I used to think cities made me tired. The constant pulse of traffic, the hum of fluorescents, the crowded sidewalks where no one makes eye contact, it all wore me down over the years. But after what happened, I've come to realize it wasn't the cities. It was me. I had been slowly running out of something, and I didn't know what until it was almost gone. 3 months ago, I accepted a job as a night shift maintenance technician for the Heron Hill Transit Line. That's what they called it officially. In practice, it was a half-defunct underground tram system carved beneath a town most maps no longer marked. A relic of an urban expansion plan that fizzled in the late 80s, leaving behind a handful of tunnels, 2 unused platforms, and a local bus service that barely ran. I took the job because it paid well and promised solitude, 2 things I thought would help me after the burnout. After everything fell apart in the city, there was no application process, just a voicemail on my phone from a number I didn't recognize, instructing me to report to Heron Hill's transit office at 6 p.m. the following Monday. It should have been strange, but I was too hollow to question it. Heron Hill itself was small. Faded brick storefronts, old signs sun-bleached into near anonymity. There was a diner with cloudy windows and a boarded-up cinema that still had movie posters from a decade ago curling inside the frames. The main street looped into itself like a snake eating its tail. The kind of town where people look like they've forgotten how to speak above a whisper. I stayed in a 2-room apartment above an empty hair salon. The rent was dirt cheap. The walls were thin, and when it rained, which it did often, I could hear water tapping against the pipes in odd, rhythmic ways, like someone was trying to send Morse code from inside the walls. I didn't meet a single neighbor. The transit office was just a kiosk beside the Heron Hill terminal, a low concrete building half buried in the hill, with moss slicking its roof and vines crawling toward the entrance like they were trying to pull it shut for good. Inside, it smelled of dust and old paper. I met a man named Elias, or maybe that was just what he told me. He looked like someone who had once been tall, but had shrunk from years of ducking under ceilings too low. He didn't say much, just handed me a ring of keys, a flashlight, and a binder labeled Tunnel C Protocol. He pointed at the access door to the left of the terminal and said, "Start at platform B. Walk the line. Check the lights. Don't follow any echoes." I asked what he meant. He only blinked at me. then said, "It's quiet work." Then he left. I never saw him again. I remember the first night I entered the tunnel. It wasn't dramatic, just a push of a metal door and the cool breath of damp air rushing over me. The smell was earthy, like wet stone and copper. The tunnel descended gradually, a long sloping ramp lit by industrial bulbs that buzzed just enough to feel alive. The lights spaced themselves far apart, so the gaps between them felt like moments lost to time. In those spaces, I noticed something odd. My footsteps didn't sound the same. They came back slightly wrong, like someone else was walking a half step behind me. But it was just the acoustics, I told myself. Nothing more. Platform B was just a long slab of concrete, shadowed by rusting pillars. The tracks were covered in grime and fallen leaves, though I never saw how leaves could have gotten that deep underground. My job was simple. Walk from Platform B to the old service terminal at the end of Tunnel C, checking lights, clearing debris, and reporting any signs of water damage. The air grew colder the farther in I went. The walls began to sweat moisture. Somewhere in that stretch of tunnel, the ground sloped in ways I didn't expect, angles that made no sense. I tried not to look too long at the ceiling, because sometimes I saw what looked like cracks, but they moved when I stared. I kept telling myself it was just old infrastructure. Concrete settles, water leaks, sounds bounce. The real reason I was there, the part I didn't admit to Elias or anyone, was because I needed to be forgotten for a while. After the burnout, after the firing, after the silence between me and my sister turned into a full year of absence. I didn't want to be seen anymore. But tunnels don't forget. They just wait. By the end of the first week, I had memorized every crack, every flickering bulb, every piece of graffiti, even the one near the midway pillar that read, "Wherever you stand, you cast two shadows here." That one stayed with me. I kept a logbook, mostly to ground myself. Each night I wrote down anything odd I saw or felt. Some of the entries from those early days read like this. Day 3, lights 13, 15, 16 dim, bulb 21 flickering again. Felt colder than usual near midway point. Heard dripping but found no source. Day 5. Saw what looked like a person at the far end of Tunnel C, standing still. Disappeared when I moved closer. Probably my eyes playing tricks. Day 6. Platform B, completely dark when I arrived. Power came back on without intervention. Smelled smoke, but only for a second. No source found. The more I wrote, the more I felt like I was trying to anchor myself to reality. Like if I didn't log it, it would drift away. Or worse, I would. By the end of week 2, I stopped bringing my phone into the tunnel. Not because there was no signal, though there wasn't, but because I kept thinking I heard it vibrate in my pocket when it wasn't there. And sometimes, after I powered it off, it would light up again, briefly, showing a lock screen I didn't recognize. It showed a date in the future. A small thing, easy to explain, but it stayed with me. I started to notice the rain more during this time. It never poured. It just misted constantly, like the whole town was exhaling through wet lungs. It dampened everything. My jacket, my boots, my hair. I could feel the weight of it in my bones, like something pressing down softly but persistently, the way a dream lingers even after you wake. Eventually, I stopped checking the weather. It was always raining. I couldn't remember a clear sky. Near the end of the third week, I found a door in the tunnel that wasn't on the map. It was small, metal, with a slit for a window too clouded to see through. I hadn't noticed it before, but it was carved right into the wall behind an old maintenance cabinet. There was no label, no number. When I put my hand on the knob, it was warm. I didn't open it. Not that night. But I knew then that something was waiting down there. Something I had started to feel before I even arrived in Heron Hill. A quiet beckoning, the kind that doesn't shout or claw, just waits. And I kept coming back. The rain didn't stop for the entire fourth week. Not that it was a downpour. It was that constant misting again, fine droplets in the air like suspended breath. Walking to the terminal felt like pushing through someone else's exhale. The streets were still empty. The sidewalks shimmered wet under broken street lamps. I began to feel like the entire town existed under glass. Inside the tunnel, the temperature never changed. Cold, still, but never bitter. Not like weather cold. More like the stillness you feel in a mausoleum, a preserved kind of quiet. I told myself I was acclimating to the routine, memorizing the shadows, the long, sloping hum of the air ducts, the way sound moves when you're the only person around. But things had shifted. They weren't big changes at first, just little things, out of sync like a heartbeat, skipping every few steps. One night, the flashlight beam bent. I was halfway through Tunnel C, approaching the midway support column, when the cone of light from my torch twisted. I don't mean it flickered, I mean the actual beam curved to the left, like it was being pulled by something gravitational. It lasted maybe half a second, then it was back to normal. But in that half second, the light illuminated the side wall, and there was a shape, just an outline. No face, no color, just the silhouette of something crouching low, facing the floor, as if listening. I swung the flashlight back. Nothing, just wet stone. I wrote it down in the logbook, but I didn't reread the entry. The noises started after that. At first it was water dripping, but only when I stood still. The moment I moved, the dripping stopped. When I stopped again, it started but from a different direction, always just outside my periphery. Then came the tapping. Tap, tap, tap. It echoed from the ceiling sometimes, or under the tracks, like fingers on glass. One night, I turned off all the tunnel lights, just to see what it would be like. The silence was total, the darkness absolute. I thought maybe I could listen better in the dark. Maybe I could identify the direction of the sounds. But that night, when I shut off the last light near the platform, I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. It wasn't loud. No gasping. No wheezing. Just steady, soft breath. Like someone very close was trying not to be noticed. I turned the lights back on immediately. After that, the tunnel began to feel smaller. It was still the same length. The same layout. I hadn't measured, but I walked it enough to know the rhythm of my steps. But something changed in the way it felt. The curve of the walls felt tighter. The ceiling seemed to hover lower, like it was slowly sinking each night. I brushed my head on a pipe I had walked under safely for weeks. At first I thought it was my posture, maybe I was walking more hunched. But when I held my arms straight out to the side, I could touch both walls at once. That hadn't been possible before. I started to see symbols. They weren't spray painted, not graffiti. They looked burned into the concrete. Thin, black markings like charred ink. They'd appear where I was sure I hadn't seen them the night before, near the fuse box, above the midway pillar, once even on the back of the flashlight itself. One looked like a spiral with a line through it. Another like a pair of open eyes, one above the other. I tried photographing one with an old Polaroid camera I'd brought down, but the photo came out blank. Not black, just blank. White fog. The next day, the symbol was gone. The door, the small one I'd found behind the maintenance cabinet, was still there, still warm. I hadn't told anyone about it. Who would I tell? I never saw Elias again. There was no radio contact, no other maintenance workers, no day shift. It was as if the job had only ever been meant for one person, me. I started to wonder about the protocol binder he gave me. It was light, too light. I went through it again. Most of the pages were blank. Only the first 3 had any writing. Instructions like, walk the full line each night, check bulbs, log disturbances, do not follow any echoes, do not open the small door behind the cabinet in Tunnel C. That last line hadn't been there before. My dreams changed during this period. They used to be colorless flashes of memory, forgotten cities, faces I almost recognized. But now they were fixed, always the same. I stood at the platform. The train tracks glowed red, not like heat, like memory, like old film projected onto black stone. The tunnel walls pulsed slowly, like lungs filling and deflating. And behind me, someone whispered, but I couldn't turn around, not even in sleep. Eventually, I did what I swore I wouldn't. I followed the echo. It was a voice this time, not loud, not panicked, just a calm male voice saying, "Hello? Can someone? Hello? Hello?" It came from the far end of Tunnel C, near where the tracks disappeared into a slope that was supposed to lead nowhere. The official maps called it a collapsed section, but the voice came from beyond it. I walked toward it. Slowly, the echo repeated, "Hello, can someone?" Then, midway through the tunnel, the voice stopped. I stood there, flashlight raised, and I heard my own voice come back. "Can someone? Someone? Someone?" But it didn't sound like an echo. It sounded like mimicry, like someone trying to remember how I said it. That night, the rain was louder than usual, heavy enough to hear it pounding against the tunnel roof, even that deep underground. I heard what I thought was thunder, but it came in patterns, rhythmic, like distant machinery, like wheels. I found a second logbook. It was tucked inside a rusted locker near Platform B. Looked identical to mine. Same binding, same label, Tunnel C observations. But it wasn't my handwriting inside. Whoever wrote it, they had seen the same symbols, the same narrowing tunnel, the same door. But the entries were dated 20 years ago. The last page read, "It knows when you listen. It grows when you remember." I made a map, but I lost it. Don't open the door. Don't walk backwards. If you see yourself, run. The next night, I saw something impossible. I was walking the tunnel as usual. Lights on, flashlight steady. Everything felt normal for once. Then, around the halfway point, I saw a person walking toward me from the far end. They wore the same uniform I did, held the same flashlight. I paused, raised a hand. They didn't wave back. I squinted. The person mirrored my movements, one step forward, one hand lifted, one turn of the head. They were too far to see clearly, but I knew what I was looking at. Me? I didn't sleep after that night. Not really. Even when I closed my eyes, my body stayed alert, listening for footsteps that didn't come, bracing for dreams I couldn't forget. The image of my own shape walking toward me, imitating my movements, had lodged itself somewhere deep, where thoughts become instinct, and I knew it wasn't a reflection. There were no reflective surfaces down there. Nothing that smooth, nothing that intentional. That version of me, it was separate, acting, but not understanding. Like it had seen me once, and was trying to become what it remembered. I kept walking the tunnel anyway, because that's what I was supposed to do. That's what the binder said. That's what Elias told me. But the route changed. It began with simple shifts. Pillars appearing out of place. A signal box that used to be on the left now showing up on the right. I thought maybe I was tired, confused, maybe my memory was playing tricks. Then I reached the service terminal one night and found it completely different. The room was narrower, the walls covered in condensation. The control panel was missing, replaced by an old desk with a cracked rotary phone on top. Dust floated in the air like ash, and sitting in the chair was a person. They didn't turn when I entered, just sat there, facing away, perfectly still. I didn't speak, didn't move closer. I slowly stepped back, 1 foot at a time, and left the room. The next night, the room was empty again, back to normal. But the air smelled like perfume, faint, floral, old, like someone had just left. Around this time, the tunnel stopped making sense. I measured it with my steps. From platform B to the terminal was exactly 212 paces. I'd counted it dozens of times. But now, sometimes it took 400, sometimes 80. Once, I walked for what felt like a full hour without reaching the end. My flashlight battery drained. I turned back. It only took 14 steps to return to the platform. Time too began to slide. My wristwatch would skip hours, or reverse. Sometimes I'd start the shift at 6 p.m. and return to my apartment at 4:00 the same day. Sometimes I'd emerge at sunrise, even though I had only entered the tunnel minutes before. I stopped using clocks. I relied on the rain, and the rain never stopped. The breathing became clearer, not just an impression now, but distinct. Low, steady inhales, always just behind me when I paused. Sometimes a faint exhale would brush the back of my neck. Other times, I'd feel it against the side of my face, like someone leaning close to inspect me. The temptation to spin around grew stronger each time. But I remembered the note from the second logbook. if you see yourself run. And I wondered, what happens if you turn around too fast and see something that hasn't finished becoming you? The symbols reappeared, only now they moved. I watched one, a black spiral with branching lines, slowly twist across the concrete as if drawn by an invisible finger. It left no trail, no mark, just moved, like ink under skin. I started seeing them in my apartment too, on the foggy bathroom mirror, inside the condensation of my window, drawn in the dust on the stairwell rail, each one slightly clearer than the last. The door behind the cabinet was open one night, just slightly, maybe a few inches, enough for the warm air to escape in a single breath, enough to hear something shift beyond it, a drag like cloth on stone, then silence. I closed it. I didn't touch it again for a week. Then came the train. There was never supposed to be a train. The tunnel was decommissioned. That was the entire point. No passengers, no noise, no movement. But on the 39th night, I heard the rails humming beneath my boots. A low, metallic thrum. Then came the lights, distant, flickering beams, cutting through the far end of Tunnel C. At first, I thought it was my eyes, a memory, a hallucination, a dream, but it grew louder, closer. The tunnel began to shake softly, dust falling from the cracks above. A train was coming, but it didn't look right. The headlights were too dim, the shape too narrow. The sound it made was wrong, not like metal wheels, but something slower, groaning, wet. I stepped off the tracks and hid behind the midway pillar. The train, if you could call it that, passed by in silence. No windows, no markings. Just a long, featureless black cylinder gliding far too slowly. And through the small ventilation slit in its side, I saw something watching me. Not a person, not a face, just two dark circles where eyes should be. Too wide, too still. After that, things stopped pretending to make sense. One night, I reached the end of the tunnel and found another platform. Not platform B, not any place I recognized. This one was longer, darker, covered in fog. An old wooden bench sat at the far end, and above it was a sign. Heron Hill Return Service. Return service to what? There were no exits, no staircases, no map, only a mirror, full length, bolted to the wall. I stood in front of it for a long time, and for the first minute, nothing was wrong. My reflection blinked when I blinked, tilted its head when I did, matched me perfectly. But then I moved. I reached up to scratch my shoulder, and my reflection smiled. After that, I stopped writing in the logbook. Not because I had nothing left to say, but because it wasn't mine anymore. One morning, I opened it to find new entries I hadn't written. Ones dated weeks into the future. Notes that described events I hadn't experienced yet. Descriptions of things I would later see, exact, detailed, impossible to deny. And then, June 17, you will open the door. June 17, you will see her. June 17, she will not blink. June 17, she is you. I started boarding up the walls in my apartment, taping over the mirrors, putting towels under the doors. But the rain still got in, or what I thought was rain. I began to hear tunnel sounds in my sleep. The hum of the lights, the tap of dripping water, a distant echo repeating my name. Once, I woke up standing in my hallway. My boots were wet. I had to know. So on June 17, I opened the door. It swung wide without resistance, revealing a long, sloping corridor. The walls were smooth, white, wet with condensation. No lights, just a faint glow that came from nowhere and everywhere. I stepped inside. I walked for what felt like hours. No turns, no doors, just that narrow passage descending deeper and deeper until it curved inside itself, like a spiral. Eventually, I reached a room. Small, round, padded walls, like a soundproof chamber, and in the center, a chair, wooden, simple, facing a mirror. And in the mirror, I saw her. Not me. Not exactly. She looked like me. Wore my clothes. Had my face. But she was smiling. And I wasn't. She lifted her hand and beckoned. I turned and ran. But the tunnel had changed behind me. The straight path was gone. In its place, more doors. Endless doors. Some open, revealing empty rooms. Some closed, with whispers behind them. Some breathing. I chose none of them. I walked until I saw the graffiti again. Wherever you stand, you cast two shadows here. And I realized I hadn't seen my shadow in days. Only hers. And it had started moving on its own. It's strange what the mind accepts when nothing else makes sense. By the time I realized I was no longer walking in a physical place, or at least not a place that followed rules, I understood I wasn't afraid anymore, or not in the way you'd think. It wasn't fear with teeth or adrenaline. It was something colder, quieter, like grief. Grief for a version of myself that had already been left behind. I no longer recognized the tunnel. The concrete was gone. The walls were soft now, padded in some places, slick in others, like they were made of breath or velvet or flesh. I stopped touching them after a while. The light, that faint ambient glow, no longer came from above. It came from inside the walls, and sometimes it pulsed when I walked past, like it recognized me, like it was reacting to me. The sound of dripping water had changed too. It had rhythm, not random, not echoing. It was deliberate, a pattern. And then I realized it was tapping in the same rhythm as my heartbeat. I passed door after door. Some were ajar, revealing glimpses of things that couldn't be my old apartment in the city, my sister's wedding I never attended, the hallway of my childhood home lit by candlelight. I didn't go inside. I don't know if I was supposed to. Some of the doors had numbers. Others had no markings but were covered in condensation, as if something on the other side was exhaling against them. A few of them knocked back. I reached a chamber eventually. Circular again, like the one with the mirror, but this one was larger cathedral-high ceilings that curved in on themselves like a nautilus shell. The floor was smooth, not stone, not metal, something darker, black as wet ink. In the center stood a tall object draped in a heavy sheet. I didn't touch it at first. I circled the room. The walls were marked in spirals and symbols. I now recognized, not with understanding, but with familiarity. They'd been in my dreams, on the back of my eyelids, behind every blink. There were no exits. So eventually, I lifted the sheet. Underneath was a mirror, not a real one. It had no reflection. Instead, it showed a tunnel. My tunnel, but empty. Then it changed. It showed me walking slowly, flashlight in hand. Then another version of me, standing at the platform, writing in the logbook. Then another curled in a chair, asleep beneath humming lights. And then it showed her, the other me, smiling, standing still while all the versions passed by. One by one, they walked deeper into the tunnel and didn't come back. I screamed at the mirror, hit it with the flashlight. It didn't crack. Instead, the image shifted again and showed something else. Not a person, not a shape, just presence. It hung in the tunnel air like a shadow caught mid-breath, a black fold in space, tall and narrow, always just out of focus, but watching, always watching. And I realized, the tunnel isn't haunted. It is the haunting. I turned from the mirror, and the room was no longer empty. Across from me stood Elias, but younger, no lines on his face, no sunken eyes. He smiled, the same way the woman in the mirror did. Calm, understanding, terrifying. He said nothing, just raised a hand and pointed to the wall behind me. And on it was a door, small, steel, marked with the words, "You are ready." Inside was the terminal, but not the one I knew. This one was buried in fog. The walls flickered between materials, sometimes tiled, sometimes wood, sometimes black stone that dripped upward. The bench was missing. The tracks were gone. In their place was water. Still, black, reflective. I stepped forward, and the water didn't ripple. It was solid. And in it, I saw my reflection, not moving, not blinking, just staring back. Then it spoke, with my voice, but not my words. "You remember now." I couldn't respond. "You've always been here." I shook my head. "You wanted to forget, so we let you. You volunteered." My mouth felt dry. I forced a whisper. "Volunteered for what?" The reflection smiled. "To carry it, to keep it asleep, to walk, so it can dream." And suddenly I saw it, the full shape of the tunnel, not as concrete and wire, but as a living thing, a being, vast, dormant, and it required dreamers, walkers, carriers, people who gave themselves to the pattern, people like Elias, people like me. And I remembered the breakdown, the way I begged to disappear, the call that came offering solitude, anonymity, escape, the paperwork I signed without reading, the door I walked through. I hadn't been hired. I had been chosen, or maybe I had chosen it. The final test came quietly. The tunnel returned. Concrete, rust, flickering bulbs. The platform at the end, empty. The air was cold again. And at the far end, I saw her, Me, but still, eyes closed, standing as if asleep. And I knew I had to take her place, to complete the loop, to close the circle. One more version to carry the rhythm, one more dreamer to keep it sleeping. I walked up to her slowly. The air between us thickened like syrup. The hum of the tunnel lights grew louder, not as sound, but as pressure in my ears. When I reached her, she opened her eyes, and for the first time I understood. She wasn't my reflection. She was what was left, a placeholder, and I was the one who had returned. We didn't speak. She simply stepped aside and disappeared into the wall, into the tunnel, into me. I took my place on the platform, closed my eyes, and the tunnel exhaled. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe hours, maybe weeks. The tunnel doesn't count time the way we do. The lights hum in intervals that have nothing to do with minutes. The air moves like tides on a schedule older than clocks. But eventually, I opened my eyes, and the tunnel was still. No sound, no footsteps, no whispers. Only the soft hiss of distant rain somewhere far above, muffled, like it was raining on another world. My body didn't feel like mine anymore. It worked. I could move my fingers, flex my legs, breathe, but something had changed. The way you feel when you wake up from a dream and don't remember who you are yet. Like I had been emptied and slowly poured back into myself, but not all the way. Something was missing, or maybe something extra had come with me. I walked the tunnel again, from platform B to the end. The measurements no longer shifted. The path was straight, predictable. The walls held still. The shadows obeyed light again. But I didn't write anything down. I didn't need to. The logbook was gone anyway. So was the door behind the cabinet. And the other versions of me, the echo, the sleeper, the mimic, had all faded. Only I remained. Or maybe that's not quite true. On the 50th night, I saw someone new. A figure standing at the far end of Tunnel C. They looked unsure, flashlight trembling, steps uncertain, pausing at every flickering light. I recognized the fear. They were new, like I once was. And I understood. The tunnel wasn't done. Not with me. Not with any of us. It chooses, and it waits. We carry it. We walk. So it dreams. And when it stirs, we take our places again. To keep it calm. To keep it asleep. I never tried to leave after that. Not really. I walked the tunnel each night. I watched the lights, listened to the patterns. Sometimes, I passed mirrors just for a second and saw her again. That other me, watching from the edge of glass, never moving, never blinking. Sometimes, I wonder if I'm the one who's frozen and she's the one walking. Sometimes, I wonder if this is the dream and the real world is what sleeps beneath. You might be wondering why I'm telling you all this. Maybe you found this recording. Maybe you're in Heron Hill now working some quiet job, drawn by the promise of isolation, of forgetting. Maybe the rain led you here. Maybe you heard something call your name, soft and slow, from the dark. Maybe the tunnel is already watching you. If that's true, I'm sorry. Truly. But maybe, just maybe, this is what you wanted. You wouldn't be here if you hadn't asked for silence. You wouldn't have stayed this long unless something inside you needed the quiet. And if you're lucky, you'll forget the sound of your own voice too. Because wherever you stand in Heron Hill, you cast two shadows. I never planned to move back. The town was small. Not the charming kind, more like the kind where everyone knows too much, and none of it's worth knowing. When I left at 17, I thought I was leaving forever. I had no intention of being remembered, let alone returning. But then my uncle died and left me his house. It wasn't really a house, not in the way you'd imagine. It was half residence, half library, a sloping roof structure buried in the woods just outside the northern edge of town, where the fog always seemed to settle deeper and the trees leaned too close. Uncle Lionel had been the town's archivist, or that's what he called himself. In practice, he was more like a hoarder of forgotten things: old county maps, personal letters, unlabeled cassette tapes, yellowed birth records, and newspaper clippings about people nobody talked about anymore. He lived alone, died the same way. And now his estate, which included the house, its contents, and something called the record room, belonged to me. I hadn't spoken to him in years. The last time I saw him, I was 13. He gave me a compass and told me, quite seriously, this house doesn't like being ignored. It keeps better track of you than you do of it. I didn't know what that meant. I still don't. But I took the keys anyway. I arrived in mid-October. It had just started to rain, a slow, steady drizzle that had been falling for hours. The road up to the house was little more than a dirt path, mostly hidden beneath leaves and mud. No neighbors, no visible power lines. The closest town was 5 miles away. The house sat in a hollow just beyond a line of pine. It was older than I remembered. The front door was warped, but opened without complaint. The moment I stepped inside, it felt like something inhaled. The air smelled like cedar and paper. The floors creaked not with every step, just some, like they were listening, choosing when to speak. Inside, the place was massive. Hallways split off in odd directions. The walls were lined with shelves and filing cabinets. Books piled on staircases, stacked beneath tables, organized in ways I couldn't decipher. There were no windows on the upper level. At the back of the house, down a narrow corridor lit by a single green lamp, I found a door labeled, "The Record Room, Private." It was locked. The key ring didn't have anything that fit. The house didn't have central heating, but a wood stove had been recently used. A kettle still sat on it, half full. I poured it out. The water was black. I didn't unpack that night. I just dropped my bag by the bed and lay on the mattress, still wrapped in plastic. The rain tapped against the roof like it was writing. I dreamed of paper, stacks of it, reaching the ceiling, and a figure sorting through them with long, careful fingers. He wasn't my uncle, but he wore his coat. The next morning, I began cataloging. It seemed like the only logical thing to do. Every shelf, every drawer, every labeled binder, and handwritten note. Some were dated as far back as 1890. Others had no dates at all, only names, always first and last, always capitalized. Some of them were mine, By the third day, the rain still hadn't stopped. The lights flickered in the back hallway, and I began to notice a draft from behind the record room door, a faint pulsing cold. I found more of Uncle Lionel's journals in the attic crawl space. He didn't write about daily life. He wrote entries, filed like case reports, each one titled with a name and date, followed by a short summary of anomalies. Eleanor F. walked backward into the lake, returned 3 weeks later, different handwriting. John V. claimed the phone never stopped ringing, though we removed the line in '88. Margaret T. grew increasingly allergic to mirrors. Some pages were torn out. Others were blacked out. In one journal, dated 2 months before his death, Lionel had written, "The house keeps memories for the town that no one else wants. But I don't think it forgets what it keeps. I think it saves." And beneath that, in ink smeared by water, they're starting to knock from inside the records. That night, I heard it. Not loud, not violent. Just a soft knock once, twice, from the other side of the record room door. Then silence. Then a whisper, so low I couldn't hear the words. I didn't respond. I just watched the green lamp flicker once, and then stay on. I checked the clock. It was 2:17 a.m., the exact time of death listed on Lionel's certificate. The next day, I found a small box tucked behind a panel in the wall. Inside was a key, wrapped in cloth, tied with string, and a single note. "Don't enter the record room until you're willing to be remembered too." I haven't opened it. Not yet. But tonight, I felt the knock again. 3 times. Soft, measured, like someone filing a memory behind a door that used to know my name. I didn't open the record room. Not that day. Not the next. But the key sat heavy in my coat pocket, as if the house itself were keeping track of whether I carried it. And the door kept knocking. The rhythm changed slightly each night. Sometimes 1 knock, sometimes 3. Once, 5 long taps spaced out, like slow, calm heartbeats, always between 2:0 and 2:30 a.m., always followed by that same near-silent whisper, like paper being turned over too fast to read. I began sleeping with the lamp on. Cataloging continued. But the deeper I went into the house, the less sense it made. Some shelves were arranged alphabetically, but only by first name. Some drawers held photographs I don't remember being taken of myself, aged differently, standing outside the house at night, or sitting on the back steps staring into the trees. One photo showed me holding a journal I hadn't found yet. In the photo, I was smiling. I am not smiling now. I asked the town clerk if my uncle had hired any assistants before he died, maybe someone who had kept the records organized while he aged. She looked confused. "Lionel worked alone," she said. "Didn't let anyone touch his filing system." When I asked who'd taken the photos of me, she only frowned. What photos? The next morning, one of the bookshelves had moved. It wasn't subtle. It had shifted 6 feet down the hallway. Dragged, not lifted deep grooves, scratched into the wood floor like teeth marks. Behind it, a closet I hadn't seen before. Inside, a stack of boxes, sealed with twine and red wax, each one labeled with my name. The top box contained a single cassette tape, no label. I don't own a cassette player, but the house did. There was a small recorder in the sitting room that hadn't worked since I arrived. Until now, I played it. The tape hissed for about 10 seconds. Then, October 15, rain constant. Memory returned. Do not open the door until you've found the entry, marked only with your own handwriting. Then silence. My voice. Calm, slow, slightly deeper than I remember. I didn't record that. At least, not yet. The walls feel softer now. Not literally, just in atmosphere. Like they bend slightly when I walk by, then reshape themselves once I leave the room. The lamp in the back hallway, the green one, no longer flickers. It pulses. At the same time, each night. 2:17 a.m. I started finding duplicates. Not of objects, of rooms. The upstairs hallway has 2 linen closets now, though it only had one last week. They're identical, but the towels in one are slightly damp. Always, no matter the time of day. The second floor bathroom mirror now reflects the hallway behind me, even when the door is shut. And this morning, the kitchen had 2 refrigerators. One works. The other hums at a pitch I can feel in my teeth. The journals are shifting. They rearrange themselves each morning. I mark them, try to track their positions. But each time I return, they've been reordered into something almost meaningful, as if the house is curating its own memory. And then there are the new entries, on pages that weren't there before. In my uncle's hand, mostly, but not entirely. The record room is not a place, it is a role. One held long enough and then passed on. The door is not locked. You are. I found Lionel's last entry 3 nights ago. It was written on the wall behind a bookshelf in the attic, burned into the plaster, carved deep and charred. The house is trying to remember a name, but it's too full. I'm not strong enough to hold it. You might be, if you can still forget who you were before it asks. Last night, I walked the halls without a flashlight. I wanted to know where the house creaked, which doors sighed when I passed, which rooms seemed to notice. I reached the record room at 2:18 a.m. No knock. This time, the door was warm, and I heard breathing, not behind the door, from the walls. Slow, rhythmic, like someone sleeping shallowly, just under the surface. I pressed my hand against the wood. It exhaled, soft and cold, and something whispered directly into my ear. You've already opened it. That's why you're here. I woke the next morning in the study. Notebook open, pen in hand. 3 words written over and over. Make the index. I don't know what I'm indexing. Not really, but I've started. Because the house is getting heavier. The air, the walls, my own thoughts. I forget things now. Words. Simple memories. Last week's breakfast. The name of my first dog. But the house remembers. It always remembers. And when I forget something, I find it filed. On a shelf. In a drawer. Under a heading I never wrote. I haven't opened the record room. but I think I'm already inside it. The house has started filing me. That's the only explanation I have. I found a drawer in the back hallway labeled with the year I was born. Inside were pages of old school reports I barely remembered writing, photos of me at parties I couldn't name, a medical form with an emergency contact I don't recall listing. Some of it made sense. Some of it hadn't happened yet. A bus ticket, a receipt for a jacket I've never owned, a letter I haven't written addressed to someone named Clara, in handwriting unmistakably mine. I haven't left the house in days. I've tried. The path back to town is different every time. The trees curve too tightly. The trail loops back. Once I walked for what felt like an hour only to find myself at the back door, mud still fresh on my boots. When I checked the grandfather clock, only 2 minutes had passed. I haven't opened the record room, but the house has. At least once. 3 nights ago, I woke at 3 a.m. in the armchair by the cold stove. Not sure how I got there. The hallway beyond the kitchen glowed green, but the lamp had gone out. Still, the glow was there, and so was the sound. Soft, steady, pages turning. I followed it. At the end of the hall, the record room door stood open, just an inch. No knock. No warmth, just that sound paper sliding across paper in the dark. I didn't go in, but I looked. It was not a room. Not exactly. It was larger than it could have possibly been, a chamber of shelves and cabinets that curved upward like the inside of a spiral shell. Files, boxes, binders, tapes, light without source. Floor without end, and figures moving among the stacks. Not walking, floating, not ethereal, exact. Their movements mirrored the sound of my breathing. One of them turned. They had my face. I shut the door. It didn't fight me, but it felt like shutting a book that wasn't finished. Since then, the green light has followed me. I'll turn on a desk lamp, and it will flicker once, then glow faintly green. I'll light a candle, and the flame will pulse emerald for a heartbeat. And every night at 2:17 a.m., I hear the soft sound of drawers opening somewhere behind the walls. I started hearing voices in the index pages. That's what I call the section of the house I've come to know best, the wing that organizes the raw entries. It's not one room. It's a cluster of 7, maybe more, filled with cabinets marked only by verbs. Lost, returned, unspoken, changed, borrowed. When I open one at random, I sometimes hear whispers, never clear, just enough to remember forgetting, like walking into a room and suddenly knowing you left something behind, years ago, on a night you swore you'd never revisit. The other night, I found a cabinet marked replaced. Inside, a mirror, just a mirror. But when I looked into it, I didn't see my own face. I saw the kitchen behind me, empty, then not. In the reflection, I watched myself walk in, sit, eat, write something, then stop and stare directly into the mirror, the version of me in the reflection, watching this version. and then blink. I looked behind me. The kitchen was empty, but the chair rocked once, softly. The mirror is gone now. I never moved it. I asked the house a question last night, out loud. I stood in the middle of the sitting room and said, "What are you?" There was no reply, but every drawer in the unspoken room slid open, all at once, and the lamp turned green. I'm not afraid. I should be, but I'm not. There's something about the rhythm of the place now that feels familiar, not just from this life, from before, like I've been here long ago, walking these halls in a different body, filing memories that were never mine but needed to be kept anyway. And then last night, I found the new wing. It wasn't there before. Beyond the index rooms, behind a narrow passage between two crooked shelves, a hallway of doors, each labeled with a feeling: disappointment, shame, hope, reluctance, departure, each one locked, except the one marked expectation. Inside, a chair, a table, a tape recorder, the same kind I'd used before, already playing. My voice, again older this time, measured, patient. You've nearly finished remembering. The house will begin to fill itself with you now. Walk slowly. Let it finish. Don't open the bottom drawer until it asks. I don't know what bottom drawer, but the way the house settles now when I sleep, it's different, more peaceful, like something is almost complete. And the record room? I still haven't entered fully, but the door never locks now. It just waits. And I feel that if I step through it completely, I won't come back out the same. But maybe that's the point. I opened the record room, not deliberately. I woke at 2:17 a.m., barefoot in the hallway, the green glow already waiting, softer now, almost kind. The door stood open, silent. The breath of cool air that drifted out felt like the hush of a question I'd already agreed to answer. And this time, I stepped through. The room was vast. I had assumed the spiral space I glimpsed earlier was a trick, a spatial distortion, the way dreams invent impossible halls. But it was real, or real enough. The air was dry, the temperature stable. Dust hung suspended like motes in syrup. And every shelf, every drawer, every labeled box bore a tag written in the same handwriting. Mine. The shelves stretched impossibly high, not up, exactly inward. I didn't walk through the record room so much as descend into it. It welcomed me, reorganized itself as I moved. When I paused, the lights dimmed. When I spoke, the floor beneath me vibrated in acknowledgement. The house was listening, and this was its heart. I found a desk. My desk. Same model I had in college. Same small scratch in the corner I'd made, with a compass point during a phone call I never wanted to finish. On the desk, a ledger, thick, leather, bound. It opened to a page marked with a green ribbon. At the top, active role, archivist, and beneath that, a signed October 2, Uncle Lionel, retired, July 19, internally accepted, successor, redacted until realization, October 23, time remaining None. Then, a signature. Mine. Already written. I tried to turn the page, but the book resisted. So I read the last line again. Time remaining. None. I didn't feel afraid. I felt anchored, as if all the slow spiraling days, the dreams, the repetitions, the endless files, had been narrowing to this point, a moment of quiet absorption. I closed the book. The shelves around me pulsed faintly. Drawers clicked into place. Cabinets rotated like clockwork. And all around me, the record of the house began to sing, not with sound, with memory. Each drawer I passed flickered open just slightly, revealing a fraction of a moment. A child's voice calling for their mother during a storm. A woman sitting in a rocking chair, crying into an envelope she never mailed. My uncle, standing in this very room, saying aloud, "It's too much for one mind, but it keeps trying anyway." And then, me, not watching, being watched. I was inside the memory of the house itself, a living archive, but it was too full. That was the horror.